So I'm Fanny Lakoubay, and I am an art and artist advisor as well. French, as you can hear, based in New York for many years, and now in Argentina to discover new crypto projects.
So as an art advisor, I know that your career has spanned a lot of digital art over the course of probably well over a decade. Talk to me about the evolution from digital art advisory to crypto art advisory.
Really, there was no digital art advisor, because digital art never made it to the market. You would go to an art fair for the past 10 years, it's barely if you saw one video screen with an obscure video and never really knew what you would get, and so was never really developed into a market. I come from more what we call art and tech now, so working at ArtNet for many years and then Christie's. And one thing that was striking is how little this part of the market works with artists, and could have sold vacuum cleaners, less glamorous, but literally the same thing. And then in 2018, when I started actually consulting for crypto platforms who needed someone who can talk to the artist and the art market side of things to experiment with the new technology. At the time it was blockchain art, no NFT art or crypto art. It was refreshing because you could see artists, build up relationships with artists and discover new artists who didn't have a background just going to art school and represented by a gallery. You had the diversity of artists background, from scientists to stay-home moms to engineers. You could feel how much fun they were having with the technology, and I think this is a very underrated element in the traditional art market, fun. We often forget that high net worth individuals and collectors are also human beings who want to have fun, and I think this is kind of why we're still all here. It's this you can feel it's a moment of something is changing, and nothing ever changed in the art market, let's face it, so it's quite exciting.
So then do you see the emergence of blockchain art as this new and exciting and vivacious medium, the thing that's restoring fun to the traditional art world?
I think there's, even collectors, right? There's, it's no secret that the art market in the most gate-kept world, right? If you're not the 0.001% collectors, you don't get access to the galleries, you don't get access via the gallery to the artist, etc., etc. So, and the art market has tried to get the tech money for many, many years. Even when in the 2000s, the first marketplaces online, ArtNet, Artsy, Paddle8, there were 100, and they were yum, 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 we're gonna get the tech people and they're gonna spend their money online. But it ended up always being the same traditional art being sold just online, and the same people who go to art fair, who go on ArtNet online to buy things. So it never really happened until now we're seeing, first crypto native collectors get in, and now the people I advise are more traditional collectors who are interested in getting more into digital art and building up digital art collections, which is refreshing to see.
What do you think are the things that are really slowing down this traditional artwork's ability to embrace technology, specifically blockchain art? Because if they've had this desire, this appetite to incorporate digital art for so long, and that's only just really started fairly recently, what's really slowing them down from embracing another technological art form, which is blockchain art? It's digital art, and the mental leap from digital art to blockchain-based digital art shouldn't be that huge. What's holding them back?
I think there's a few steps to your question. There's first, as you said, digital art, computer art. It's been software art, video art. It's been here for a very long time, decades. And they were very niche collectors, but it was always awkward, right? If you want to collect a video or a piece of software art, it was always, you didn't know what you would get, right? Are you getting the entire computer? Are you getting a room with a giant, computer and wires or USB stick, or nothing? And so like a few digital artists said that like, you know, NFTs really just help the transactability of their works and finding this like standard. I mean, NFT is a standard for people to know what they would get and make it less awkward, pretty much. And so I think this like this ties into something else that has probably slowed down the adoption is how do you display it in your home, right? Like I think this is where scenography and just like how to enjoy your art. I think these technology and hardware or solutions have been missing and are still in construction. You know, it's not easy when you have like digital art collection. You don't want your house to look like a Best Buy like or an Apple store with like 15 screens in your living room. So we've had to be very creative, right? Like and yes, there are screens, but maybe you have like you play with wallpaper and print and like, you know, projections and you know, video mapping and so on to make it work. So I think this is like when we advise collectors, it's like one at a time, right? It's like hand holding. It's like it's just explaining like how to do it properly, because I think there's also a lot of misinformation, and that led to all the scams and the, you know, like the collectors being like having their wallets emptied. It's oftentimes like just not knowing. So it will take time. I think there's also like it's not a matter of converting like everybody who collects paintings to digital art. You know, it's just not the case. So slowly but surely, and then you have like the other side, right? Like this kind of like other funnel of people who started collecting like digital collectibles and PFPs and profile pictures, like projects, and then, you know, maybe they started with Pokemon cards before and then upgraded to like the digital version, and then like you can see that like then there's, you know, the smaller part of the funnel after the PFPs, which are like a lot are transpiring into like generative art. There's a lot of mechanism similarities between the two, like, you know, like kind of creative coding and mint and discovery at mint. And generative art like then introduce them more to the concept of artists, of like concept of a work and a series and you know, slowly but surely we go like a bit more towards like unique or very small like editions of crypto art and just digital art, but it's still transacting with NFTs, right? So, and you know, there's this whole debate about are NFTs an art movement, or what's the aesthetic of like, you know, crypto art? And I think it's too early to say. It's like, as much as I love categorizing things, it's like it's too dangerous. I think we have to enjoy and present like to the collectors the diversity of experiments, because from one artist to another, even in generative art, there could be like totally different rules of like even like the link between the digital work and the physical work, or like or just how it works, and yeah, we have to slow down and enjoy, I think, the experiments, and I think that's what the collectors love. It's like they just want to connect with the concept, then they'll figure it out, like the NFT, the thing, but we tend to hide it more. Like we had that discussion where this week at Art Basel, it's you see more digital art at the fair, but almost like the NFT part is like hidden a little bit, like, and as it should. Technicalities should always go in the background.
I think you're actually one of the first people to sit with us and say, I think we should take a moment to slow down. I think most people are very much caught up in the momentum of it all, and they want to see how fast and how big we can make this. And it sounds like there's this two-directional conversation between traditional collectors who are trying to understand what the NFT aesthetic is, which I think is a fairly limiting term, because it would funnel the amount of different types and varieties of art that can exist as NFTs. And at the same time, the original, you know, NFT collectible collectors looking at art form as a new thing to collect, or something that they're trying to wrap their head around if they're not immersed in this art world. So it kind of brings me back to this idea of Tezos has unofficially been recognized as the art chain. What are the conversations that are kind of unique to Tezos that you think are going to help advance this conversation further?
The main important thing is the focus on the art, right? And not so much the yes, Tezos build the tools like for collectors, but it's like the emphasis is on the art. Like all the art platforms and the projects supported by Tezos that we've seen, like they're mostly focused on like, different types of digital art, poetry as well. So that's kind of what, to me, builds a better story and build for the future, like longer term adoption. And I think you're right, this is like double dynamic where it's like in crypto everything goes really fast and we have to build up on the momentum and develop all these tools. Like yes, that has to happen yesterday for more onboarding, for more like better UI, better adoptions by people who don't know yet what it is. But as I said, it's like the slowdown moment is also like realizing that what happened during the hype and like selling out like anything, like you cannot expect by default 10,000 whatever to sell out in seconds. And I think this set up like very wrong expectations on the artist end as well. Because the moment you have like a little bit more to know than like, oh, it's an ugly monkey and I can resell it in 2 days for like, 5 times as much money. If you have to look like, oh, who the artist is, like what's his background, like what's the concept of the work, like what is behind, it's gonna take time. And then we go back to like, what we don't like in crypto, that is like, yes, things are not gonna sell out for artists, and maybe it's okay for an exhibition to be like, on a platform for like 3 months, but it will be better on the longer term if we take time to like tell the story. And I think this is where like we're making a huge mistake by like this quick turnover, because it's not. And something happens very short term, very ego driven, like everything that happens, and then you forget about it. And then like 6 months later, someone comes and like, I did the first, like this is me, like, and you're like, no, 6 months ago we had one, but nobody can follow up with like everything that's happening. So we have this like, it's gonna hurt us in the long term because we're like slowing down because we don't have time to digest what happened before it.
Right. So basically, the pace that we're working at right now is exacerbating the speculative part of the art market that we're looking at, where it's more about jumping onto the trend because it's potentially something you can flip rather than something with real inherent value, which is what you were coming down to, in terms of applying a critical lens to what was the artist's practice, how sophisticated is the code, how many editions are there, what's the rarity value. And I think the conversations around how we assess value within an art medium on a blockchain is very different from how we may assess value in a traditional art world. And there's probably an overlap between the two. But then the question comes down to, as people are starting to grasp these concepts a little bit more, what makes generative art to you particularly special? Because you mentioned earlier there's this sort of surprise and delight moment of being like, oh, it's, you only know what you get the moment you mint.
Yeah.
So what else is there that makes this a really good moment to help people understand this better?
Yeah, I mean, specifically on generative art, I think it really benefited from the fact that like the mechanisms were close to other crypto projects, right? And actually, we've seen the same like speculative like flipping with many projects, many generative art projects, because that was during the hype market. It was like, oh yeah, I can totally apply the same like trading like principles that I have with a PFP to a project like generative art project. And sometimes artists were like, oh, what? Like it's everything sold out in 3 seconds. We didn't have time to like talk about it. Like and it's like might deserve them in the future because like until collectors really keep their work and talk about it, because that's also the point for the artist to get the word out, not just be a speculative asset. So I think, I mean, generative art, I strongly believe that like we have more like tech-savvy collectors, and I think this, if you look at many generative art projects, it has a similar aesthetic and has this like primary colors, like very like symmetrical patterns and geometric patterns and sort of like computer output friendly, and which I think talks to this audience. My problem is that like this like is how do you get So it works, right? For this like core audience, like mostly male, like collector audience, it's like, it works. But like me as a collector as well, if I put my hat on like a female collector hat and clients I advise, it's like, it doesn't really work. My brain is not wired to like be like super excited about geometric pattern and like primary colors, right? It's not organic. Like there's no fluidity. There's no like it's always a little bit like similar. And so I think what FX Hash has done and like involving more female artists, like poetry or generative poetry as well, like trying to reach out to new audience will help, because a lot of the more traditional collectors that I advise, like, they're like, okay, it looks like a computer output, like, and a screensaver, right? Which is not, obviously, but this is like where if we can manage to really keep it evolving and make it like, focus on the dynamic projects so that it's not always the same mechanism, I think this will really help more collectors get in. And I think then it's like, and I hate this like, comparison like traditional collectors, like crypto collectors or like, crypto native collectors. I think that at the end of the day, you're going to have generative art collectors. You're going to have like, people who like abstract art and they're going to be like collecting traditional paintings, but also like, abstract like NFTs and so on. So I think this, we have to go beyond that. But going back to generative art, I think we're in a point where the current projects are too similar to each other to really last in the long term. So if we don't want to have the hype and dump like effect, I think that's kind of, we need to work on more diversity, more like in every sense of the way for generative art projects, like the female artists, like different patterns, different use cases, also poetry, music, and dynamic projects.
So my last question for you is basically to tackle this diversity piece, because it's kind of this word that we throw around consistently because we want to make sure that it is involved in the conversation, but there's very little structure as to how exactly we're going to tackle that problem. And as you said, it's a problem that exists on both sides in terms of the output and like making sure that, underrepresented artists do exist on all these platforms, and also that their aesthetic and their form is appreciated on the collector side, and that there's diversity on the collector side as well. So then, this is a very big question, but what do we do about that?
I think we all have to like, be part of the puzzle with like a little piece. And, I know, for example, just panel related, like I don't accept panels that like, I'm, for example, the only female moderator and I moderate like a whole all-male panel, and I've been talking to FX Hash to like include more women, female artists. Like I think we have to, when we can, like just be mindful of that. Like we represent like mostly like women artists as well, like and also realize that like if we want to be a distributed, if not decentralized industry, like we need to also go away from the very centralized like cities where everything happens. It's always like New York, London, Paris. It's like, okay, this is exactly the same as the art market before, right? Like, and so we have to focus on other like locations, like there was a non-NFT summit in Mexico City. Like we need more of these. There's like, just for traffic in Miami. There's so many other cities where there's like many artists to discover, and I think we're too stuck on like, it's always the same artists we hear about. And even when we rediscover OG artists, it's always the same artists we rediscover, and you're like, well, but there's many more. So there's no magic bullet.
And our last question that we ask all of our speakers is, if you could describe blockchain in one word, what would it be?
Magic.
I like that. I think that was the fastest response that we had to that question.
Little easy answer, but I'll stick to my magic.
I like it. Thank you so much for
thank you.
This is awesome.